Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 19 based on novel. So let's start. Ju Yuan approached the pavilion, only to be stunned. To his surprise, there was already someone inside. In the stone pavilion, a beautiful figure in white leaned against a stone chair. Her white clothes outlined her slender curves, fine black hair hanging downwards, a bottle in one hand and a cup in the other as she leisurely poured for herself and drank. Ju Yuan's gaze paused on the beautiful figure's face. The corners of his mouth immediately beginning to twitch. Yao Yao. Ju Yuan's eyes nearly popped out from their sockets. Ju Yuan could not help but ask, "You? Why are you here?" Yao Yao lifted her gaze, looking towards Ju Yuan as she softly chuckled. "Ha, not bad. I did not expect you to be the ultimate winner. This has truly surpassed my expectations." Yao Yao cocked her head as she smiled and continued, "I too do not know how I arrived here. When the green flood descended, I was picked up and sent here." Ju Yuan's face practically turned green with indignation. He had fought nail and tooth. In contrast, Yao Yao had done nothing at all, but she was still able to reach this place earlier than him. Even with his mental fortitude, Ju Yuan could not help but feel a little shattered by this difference in treatment. How could the gap between two people be so tremendous? How is this fair? Ju Yuan walked into the pavilion, snatching the cup in Yao Yao's hand and downing it in one fluid motion. Yao Yao stared at the cup in Ju Yuan's hand, which she had been drinking from earlier. Her eyes immediately narrowed dangerously as she asked with a slight smile, "Ju Yuan, do you want to die?" Upon hearing her danger-laced tone, Ju Yuan instantly understood and hastily put down the cup as he awkwardly said, "I'm seriously injured, and any little knock might kill me. Please don't be rash." Yao Yao rolled her eyes at him and snatched back the cup. If an outsider dared to do what Ju Yuan had just done, she would have blasted him to ashes with 100 Genesis rune scrolls long ago. Ju Yuan hurriedly tried to change the topic with a smile, "Big sis Yao Yao, what is this place? Isn't there supposed to be a blessing here?" Yao Yao stretched her back, exposing her proud, soul-stirring curves as she lazily said, "No idea. I've been sitting here drinking for most of the day, and haven't gotten a look around." Ju Yuan was speechless. Others would be willing to even throw away their lives just to vie for the blessing, while this Yao Yao was gifted with a head start, but barely showed any interest. In her eyes, finding the blessing was clearly ranked much lower than finding good alcohol. "I was waiting here to see who would eventually come in. If it was Wu Huang or Yi Ming, it would mean that you failed, and I will help you chase them out." Yao Yao's spirited and clear eyes stared at Ju Yuan with some surprise as she continued, "However, I did not expect that you would actually make it, meaning Wu Huang lost to you." A slight warmth flowed in Ju Yuan's heart when he heard this. So the main reason why Yao Yao had stayed here was because of him. Ju Yuan calmly said, "Yeah, I fought with him, slayed his physical body and snatched back a portion of the sacred dragon blessing. Unfortunately, his spirit escaped." Yao Yao placed a hand on her sharp snow-white chin as she smiled and said, "Such an outcome is indeed somewhat out of my expectations." Her eyes swept across Ju Yuan's face, seemingly smiling as she said, "Why are you acting so calm? You're clearly very pleased with yourself, right?" The corners of Ju Yuan's mouth twitched in embarrassment. Yao Yao's fine crystal-like nails gently tapped the jade bottle. "But it is a feat you should be pleased about. Even I never expected you to reach so far." Ju Yuan was surprised. "You're praising me?" Yao Yao extended a hand and gently rubbed Ju Yuan's head as she earnestly said, "You have potential, little boy." Ju Yuan's face turned black with anger as he lightly smacked away her hand. "As for his spirit escaping, it doesn't sound like it will be a problem, because he has already lost his best chance," said Yao Yao with a chuckle. Ju Yuan nodded, an additional trace of confidence on his calm face as he said, "I've already slayed him once, and will naturally be able to kill him a second time. He won't be so lucky next time." In the past, he had lagged far behind Wu Huang, making it the most dangerous period for him. Even so, he had managed to persist through this period. It was as Yao Yao said. Wu Huang had lost his best chance. And such a chance would not appear again. Yao Yao rose to her feet, her black hair swinging past Ju Yuan's face along with a whiff of tranquil fragrance. She lifted her perfect, unblemished face, light shining upon it as she peered into the distance and said in an unenthusiastic voice, "Hi, since we're here, let's head further in and see what's here." Zhu Yuan's eyes glowed upon hearing this, his eyes filled with impatience. He had suffered all sorts of hardships in order to come here, all for the sake of the greatest blessing. Hence, compared to Yaoiro's laziness, his heart was practically leaping from his throat. The two walked out of the stone pavilion, heading deeper into the place. They walked along the cobbled mountain path, passing through a dense forest before their footsteps finally came to a halt. To their front was a cliff. Beyond the cliff was seemingly endless swirling mists. A giant pine tree stood by the edge of the cliff. Under the tree, which was jade white, there was a stone chair on which a figure could be seen. Finally here. The moment Yao Yao and Zhu Yuan's eyes fell upon the figure, a gentle and kind voice was transmitted over. The figure raised his head. One would see that his jade-like skin was just like a baby's. Long hair scattered behind him, his face was that of a young man. His eyes, however, seemed to contain an ancientness that spoke of countless years of experiences. When Zhu Yuan met his gaze, the former felt an indescribable pressure that even made his spirit tremble faintly. This made Zhu Yuan understand that the handsome young man before them was an extremely terrifying existence. In fact, he was likely the legendary saint that had died. Of course, the one before them was likely just a mere fragment of the original. Even though he was only a fragment, he was still able to make Zhu Yuan feel an indescribable pressure. After spending some time accustoming themselves to the pressure, Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao approached. "Elder." Zhu Yuan cupped his fists together, respect on his face. Yao Yao was still somewhat listless, even unable to stop herself from covering her mouth as she yawned. The young man merely smiled faintly. He stood up as his gaze swept across Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao, those bottomless eyes seemingly able to see through all secrets. He walked over, giving a casual nod in response to Zhu Yuan's respect, before casting his gaze towards Yao Yao. He looked at Yao Yao, a long and close look. In that moment, Zhu Yuan could sense satisfaction and admiration appear in the man's gaze. He then laughed softly. "I've finally met you." Zhu Yuan was practically on the verge of tears. "Come on. I was the one who fought all the way up here with my abilities. Why is there such a huge difference in treatment?" When Zhu Yuan was nearly about to burst into tears due to the difference in treatment, Yao Yao raised her eyebrows slightly, looking at the mysterious existence that wore the form of a young man and asked, "You know me?" The refreshingly handsome young man chuckled, but did not answer her question. "I know Kang Yuan." "You know Master Kang Yuan?" Zhu Yuan was taken aback, some astonishment in his gaze as he looked towards the young man. "Elder, you are?" The young man before them seemed to be about the same age as them, but his seemingly bottomless ancient eyes told them that he was definitely an ancient monster-like existence. The handsome young man fell in thought for a bit, before he smiled and said, "I am the saint who died, you may call me Patriarch Kang Xian." Zhu Yuan secretly remarked in his heart, as expected, this young man is that legendary saint. Of course, the current me is merely made from a little spirit energy. My original body has already died. Patriarch Kang Xian spoke with a faint smile, his expression honest and forthcoming. "But why is Kang Yuan not by your side?" asked Patriarch Kang Xian, as he looked towards Yao Yao. Yaoiro's pretty face dimmed slightly. Grandpa He was attacked by mysterious enemies, so he left. Patriarch Kang Xian's eyes widened a little. "Elder, do you know where I can find Grandpa He?" Yaoiro's bright eyes looked towards Patriarch Kang Xian. She had grown up under Kang Yuan's care, and treated him as a grandpa. She was naturally worried about Kang Yuan, but did not know how to find him. Patriarch Kang Xian shook his head. "You need not worry for him. The old guy's pretty capable, and will naturally seek you out when he feels that it's safe." A trace of disappointment flitted across Yaoiro's eyes, before she began to ask another question, "Does Elder know of my roots?" She had lived with Kang Yuan in the isolated domain since young, and had never come into contact with the outside world nor knew where she came from. At the very least, she should have parents, right? Kang Yuan had never mentioned such matters to her, although Yao Yao did not mind too much. In addition, there were the mysterious enemies that even Grandpa He was fearful of. Where had they come from? She could feel that those people were likely after her. Patriarch Kang Xian was silent for a while, before he spoke. "It is not appropriate for me to speak of these matters, but you will discover the answers for yourself if you find a chance in the future." His words were clearly avoiding Yaoiro's question. Hence, Yao Yao did not ask any further on the topic. He, am I right to say that the two of you have come here searching for my blessing? Patriarch Kang Xian smiled widely as he hurriedly shifted the topic. Yao Yao did not respond, leaving Zhu Yuan no option but to step in. We were directed here by the Saint Tablet. Patriarch Kang Xian smiled and said, do you want to hear my story? Before either of them could reply, however, he had already seated himself by the white jade tablet and summoned 2 stools from the mist with a wave of his hand, before he warmly said, come, have a seat. Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao exchanged a look before they sat down. Patriarch Kang Xian beamed as he shot a look at Zhu Yuan. Kang Yuan has good eyes, he's gotten himself another pretty decent disciple. Over the years, this is the first time I have seen such a weak person arrive here. Zhu Yuan's face turned black. Was this praise or an insult? With a faint smile, Patriarch Kang Xian beckoned with his hand, causing the mist to gather. It filled their surroundings, the surging mists transforming into a screen of sorts. In the screen, a figure stood in the air. From his appearance, it was Patriarch Kang Xian. Vast and seemingly endless Genesis Chi surged above Patriarch Kang Xian's head, covering the heavens. It was impossible for anyone to imagine how powerful such Genesis Chi was. However, Patriarch Kang Xian's expression was extremely grave, while seemingly carrying something in his arms. At closer inspection, one would find that it looked a little like a baby. The world in the screen was suddenly torn open at this moment. Endless lightning poured out as if to destroy the entire world. From within the endless raging lightning, 3 rays of light descended, landing at 3 different directions around Patriarch Kang Xian. Inside, one would faintly see 3 figures standing in the air. Their bodies gave off a holy, sacred light, an authority that no one was allowed to even question. It felt as if they were existences that were high and mighty to an indescribable degree, like the gods themselves. The mere sight of those barely visible figures made Zhu Yuan feel pressure swallow his body, causing his spirit to shiver. An earth-shaking battle erupted in the screen. The 3 godlike figures surrounded and attacked Patriarch Kang Xian, while he responded in kind. However, Patriarch Kang Xian was not a match for them in the end. At the final, critical juncture, Patriarch Kang Xian ripped open space itself and pushed the baby in as his body was struck by the 3 godlike figures. Patriarch Kang Xian's body burst apart, transforming into a million rays of light that slowly scattered as they fell. The scene playing on the screen ended at this point. The surroundings of the white jade table was silent. Shock colored Zhu Yuan's face. Although there were no sounds from the screen, he could still feel an indescribable pressure. A battle of such proportions was truly akin to Armageddon. But who were those godlike figures? Why had they attacked Patriarch Kang Xian? Do you know who was the baby I was protecting is? There was a smile on Patriarch Kang Xian's youthful face as he looked towards the 2. Before either of them could reply, his gaze paused on Yaoiro's beautiful face as he said, you are that baby. Zhu Yuan was stupefied, even his ears buzzing somewhat. The one Patriarch Kang Xian protected till his death was Yao Yao. Yaoiro's hands suddenly clenched tightly, a blank look in her eyes. It was clear that she did not have any memories about this incident. Elder must be joking, right? If that baby was big sis Yao Yao, the time doesn't match up, said Zhu Yuan with some difficulty. Patriarch Kang Xian had died over 1,000 years ago, while Master Kang Yuan said that Yao Yao had been living with him for about a dozen years in their isolated domain. Patriarch Kang Xian chuckled. She is not ordinary, so you shouldn't judge her by the logic of ordinary people. Of course, frankly speaking, her age is indeed not far from your own. Zhu Yuan could not find any words to say. Yaoiro's identity was indeed shrouded in mystery, while also involving unimaginably huge matters. Else they would not have come into contact with people like Master Kang Yuan and Patriarch Kang Xian. These were true ancient monster-like existences. Behind all this was likely some sort of conspiracy that extended to the very ends of the sky. Yao Yao was silent for a long time, before she softly said, if so, you can be said to be my savior. Patriarch Kang Xian smiled in a carefree manner. Yao Yao fell into thought for a while, before suddenly taking out a cup. She then fished out a jade gourd, filled the cup and offered it to Patriarch Kang Xian. This cup is thanks towards old Mr. Although she did not know why, at the end of the day, the person before her had died while saving her. In addition, Yao Yao could sense that he was not lying. Patriarch Kang Xian was stunned for a moment as he stared at the cup before him. Soon after, he chuckled and said, I find myself liking this cup of alcohol. He held it with both hands and downed it in one swift motion, seemingly wanting to bask in this moment a little more. Yao Yao gazed at Patriarch Kang Xian and asked, Who are the three figures that attacked old Mr.? They should be after me, right? And Grandpa Hei's departure is likely also related to them. They are the... Patriarch Kang Xian's brows seemed to lock together. He was silent for a very long time, before he slowly spat out two words that seemed to contain an inexplicable presence. Sacred race, sacred race. As these two words echoed through the mist, space seemed to ripple faintly. There was no longer any noise to be heard from their surroundings, as if all things were being suppressed. From the sight of Patriarch Kang Xian's gloomy expression, Zhu Yuan could faintly feel the suffocating feeling from those two words. All of a sudden, he recalled the scenes he had seen in the underground palace of the battle puppet sect in Blackwater. A long time ago, many powerful sects existed in the vast land of Blackwater. Later on, however, due to one of the so-called sacred race's prided geniuses dying there, they sent down divine punishment, exterminating every last life form in Blackwater. Heartless and powerful. This was the only impression Zhu Yuan had towards the sacred race. He had thought it would be a long time before he would encounter this entity again, but who could have expected that he would once again hear of it here? Zhu Yuan could not help but ask, what is the sacred race? Yao Yao's bright eyes also looked towards Patriarch Kang Xian. She had read many ancient texts, but was unable to find much information regarding the sacred race. Patriarch Kang Xian looked towards the sky with a complicated expression, an expression mixed with sorrowful hatred and fear. At the beginning, before any living had come into existence, the first race to be born from the primal mass of creation was the sacred race. Patriarch Kang Xian slowly continued, the sacred race was endowed with superior talent, making them extremely powerful. In ancient times, they were the rulers of the world. Every other race, whether man, beast, or anything else, were enslaved by them, living under their control. Later on, the various races rebelled, causing a great war to break out. Only through this were they able to free themselves from their slave shackles. Even so, the sacred race still act as if they are better than everyone else, making it forbidden to insult them. Members of the sacred race have extremely high status, and the other races do not dare to make enemies of them, allowing them to thread over the races as they please. Only the inexhaustible human race was able to grow strong on their own and make a place for themselves in the world. From our tiny beginnings, we struggled and grew, countless honorable ancestors protecting each generation. By paying a tremendous price, the human race was able to carve a place for ourselves. Even so, we were still at a disadvantage. Patriarch Kang Xian sighed softly. Do you know what land we are currently on? Sangshuan Heaven, answered Zhu Yuan. Patriarch Kang Xian then asked, what about outside Sangshuan Heaven? Zhu Yuan was rather taken aback. Sangshuan Heaven was already vast beyond his view. As for outside Sangshuan Heaven, how would he know? His current level was far too low after all. To be precise, the world we're on is called Qianyuan World. It is composed of 9 heavens, and Sangshuan Heaven is one of them. Zhu Yuan was wide-eyed and slack-jawed. Only now did he realize how tiny he was. The seemingly endless Sangshuan Heaven in his eyes was a mere one of 9. Just how vast was the entire Qianyuan world? Of the 9 heavens, the sacred race owns 4, while the other 5 are shared by the various races. Only now did Zhu Yuan truly understand how tyrannical the sacred race was. To think that a single race would own nearly half of Qianyuan world. Then why is the sacred race after me? Yao Yao frowned slightly. This was clearly the greatest mystery. The sacred race relentlessly hunted her down, and even a saint-level expert, like Patriarch Kang Xian, had been willing to die in order to protect her. Not to mention Grandpa Hei, who had also been protecting her all this time. In response to this question, Patriarch Sangshuan was silent for some time, before he said, I cannot give you an answer, because the implications are far too great. Both of you are still too weak. Knowing too much will only allow you to be more easily found by the great powers of the sacred race. He stared at Yao Yao and Zhu Yuan as he continued, in the future, when both of you become truly strong, you will naturally find out. Yao Yao gently bit into her red lips in silence. Patriarch Kang Xian laughed and began to speak again, moreover, you are not the only reason why the sacred race attacked me. I was once the #1 expert in Sangshuan heaven after all, and founder of the Sangshuan sect. Back then, my sect was the #1 sect in Sangshuan heaven. Sangshuan sect her. Zhu Yuan's heart shook slightly. The barefoot uncle he met in Saint Romain's city seemed to be from the Sangshuan sect. He never imagined Patriarch Kang Xian would be the founder and teacher ancestor of the Sangshuan sect. Zhu Yuan suddenly asked, then what relation does Sacred Palace have to the sacred race? The envoy of Sacred Palace had just come to mind. In the current Sangshuan heaven, the Sacred Palace was the strongest. Scorn appeared in Patriarch Sangshuan's eyes when he heard the two words Sacred Palace as he sneered, what else can they be but the sacred race's dogs? After the Great War, the various races were freed from the sacred race enslavement and set up the Chaos Origins Sacred Killer Array, which restricted the entry of the apex-level experts of the sacred race into the 5 great heavens. However, the sacred race began to recruit members of the human race, creating a faction that served them, treated them as gods, and did their bidding. If not for the Sacred Palace's meddling, resulting in a vulnerability in the Chaos Origin Saint Killer Array that in turn allowed the apex-level experts of the sacred race to descend, I would have long wiped them off the face of this world. At this point, chilling killing intent rose in Patriarch Kang Xian's eyes. Though you were part of the reason why the sacred race attacked me, the other part is because they were after that Sangshuan Saint stamp in my possession. Sangshuan Saint stamp. Zhu Yuan blinked. What was it? A solemn expression emerged on Patriarch Kang Xian's face as he slowly explained, when the world was formed and the 9 heavens took shape, 9 objects were born from the source energy. They are known as the 9 world stamps, and the Sangshuan Saint stamp is one of them. The owners of these saint stamps are the rulers of each of the heavens. They are known as the Heaven Masters. And I was the previous Heaven Master of Sangshuan heaven. Patriarch Sangshuan smiled faintly as he declared this, a rarely seen pride together with a stern, dignified aura appearing on his youthful handsome face. Heaven Master. Zhu Yuan secretly wet his lips. What a domineering title. The Master of a Heaven Her. Looks like Patriarch Sangshuan was really damn amazing. Sacred Palace schemed to obtain that Sangshuan Saint stamp to replace me and become the new Heaven Master of Sangshuan heaven. Hence why they purposely drew over the apex-level sacred race experts. Patriarch Kang Xian's eyes were ice-cold. Zhu Yuan could not help but ask, then, did they succeed? Patriarch Kang Xian chuckled. Although they killed me and divided my spirit into parts that were sealed, they underestimated me. Sangshuan Saint stamp was also split and scattered by me, so how could they have succeeded? Zhu Yuan breathed a tiny sigh of relief when he heard this. He had no good feelings towards Sacred Palace. What's more, the Sacred Palace envoy had secretly tried to help Wu Huang kill him outside the Saint Romain's domain. Thus, he would naturally be opposed to seeing Sacred Palace flourish. Patriarch Kang Xian looked at Zhu Yuan and suddenly said, do you know the origins behind the Saint rune you obtained? Zhu Yuan was stunned, seemingly realizing something as his eyes widened. Could it be? Patriarch Kang Xian smiled faintly and slowly nodded his head. However, his voice was akin to thunder when it landed in Zhu Yuan's ears, causing him to be shocked into a daze. That's right. The Saint rune you obtained comes from the Sangshuan Saint stamp. No wonder it's so amazing. A long while later, Zhu Yuan gradually returned to his senses as he sighed in amazement. This Saint rune was able to find the vulnerabilities in numerous Genesis techniques, allowing him to break the opponent's techniques with the minimum amount of power. Such an ability was practically cheating. In the previous battle with Wu Huang, if not for the Saint rune's miraculous power, Zhu Yuan would have had to pay an even steeper price to obtain victory. Hence why Zhu Yuan was struck by a sudden flash of understanding when he heard it had originated from the Sangshuan Saint stamp. This Saint rune is called the Decoder Saint rune, and has the ability to find the vulnerabilities in all things. It's also one of the 4 Saint runes that I split off from the Sangshuan Saint stamp. Patriarch Sangshuan smiled faintly. One of the 4 split-off Saint runes. Zhu Yuan quickly realized the key words. Patriarch Kang Xian nodded as he elaborated, when I was ambushed by the great powers of the sacred race, they tried to take the Sangshuan Saint stamp I controlled. However, they never imagined that I was already long prepared for such a scenario. I had sealed the main vessel, while splitting off the 4 Saint runes on it, weakening its power and preventing the sacred race from finding its location. Zhu Yuan licked his lips inside. So there were a total of 4 of these mysterious saint runes. The decoder saint rune was already so amazing. Zhu Yuan wondered what kind of powers the other 3 possessed. Patriarch Kang Xian grinned as he gazed at Zhu Yuan, and suddenly said in a serious voice, "Little lad, I see that you have fantastic talent, and have an important mission for you." Zhu Yuan could sense that something was wrong. "Elder, you can't be thinking of asking me to find that Sangshuan saint stamp, right?" "Smart lad," praised Patriarch Kang Xian. Zhu Yuan immediately began shaking his head. "Elder, you think too highly of me. I'm only a little Heaven Gate stage practitioner. How can I possibly have the qualifications to even touch such an ultimate treasure?" He was not brain damaged. Sure, that Sangshuan saint stamp was an ultimate treasure, but Zhu Yuan knew that it was also akin to a scalding hot sweet potato. Let alone the sacred race, even Sacred Palace was already an unimaginable behemoth in his eyes. If he were to come to possess that Sangshuan saint stamp, and Sacred Palace somehow detected it, the disaster that followed would definitely be beyond his ability. Unambitious brat. Patriarch Kang Xian glared at Zhu Yuan. However, the former was a little surprised that Zhu Yuan was able to reject him. After all, any ordinary person would have long lost any semblance of rationality after hearing about this ultimate treasure, only greed left in them as they desperately tried to think of how to get their hands on it. In a certain way, he did admire Zhu Yuan for having such rationality. "Rat, don't you want to protect her?" Patriarch Kang Xian shot a glance to the side at Yao Yao. There was no hesitation in Zhu Yuan's voice as he answered, "That is my promise to Master Kang Yuan." Patriarch Kang Xian merely let out an icy chuckle. "But you now know what kind of person she is, right? Do you dare to provoke her enemies? Do you think the likes of you can protect her?" Zhu Yuan calmly replied, "I do not know whether I will be able to protect her, but I will do everything in my power. I promised Master Kang Yuan that the only way anyone will be able to hurt her is by stepping over my corpse." By the side, Yao Yao's bright eyes seemed to swirl a little. She cast a casual glance at him as her red lips curled slightly downwards. "For the past 1 to 2 years, I've been the one protecting you." Although she said so, there was a glimmer of a smile in her pupils. Zhu Yuan's face turned red as he tried to explain, "You've got to give me time to grow stronger." "That's a little more like it." Patriarch Kang Xian chuckled before he continued, "However, I have to tell you that if that Sangshuan saint stamp lands in the hands of Sacred Palace, the Sacred Palace Master would become the new master of Sangshuan Heaven. When that happens, the range of his senses will grow beyond your imaginable. In fact, he may even be able to discover Yao Yao. In addition, because you've already obtained one of the saint runes, the first agenda on the Sacred Palace Master's list after obtaining that Sangshuan saint stamp would be to find the 4 saint runes, and allow the stamp to regain its full power. And you will definitely be the first person in his crosshairs." Zhu Yuan's expression could not help but change. It had clearly yet to strike him that the Sant rune was also a scalding hot sweet potato. "Elder, didn't you say that Sangshuan saint stamp was sealed by you and no one will be able to find it?" Patriarch Kang Xian smiled faintly. "It was indeed sealed by me, but Sacred Palace has never stopped searching for it. The Sacred Palace Master is not useless either, and at this rate, he will be able to sense it sooner or later." Zhu Yuan was speechless. When Patriarch Kang Xian saw the increasingly pained look on Zhu Yuan's face, his tone softened slightly as he said, "Moreover, I don't intend for you to find that Sangshuan saint stamp now. You may first search for the other 3 saint runes. That way, even if that Sangshuan saint stamp really ends up in the Sacred Palace's hands, the Sacred Palace Master would not be able to become the Heaven Master of Sangshuan Heaven." He shot a sideways glance at Zhu Yuan while he said, "I don't believe that you aren't interested in those 3 saint runes." Zhu Yuan wet his lips. It would be a lie to say he wasn't interested in them. He had already experienced the amazing ability of the decoder saint rune, and was naturally itching to find out what powers the other 3 saint runes possessed. However, Kang Xian's words were not wrong either. The sacred race clearly wanted to capture Yao Yao, and as the dogs of the sacred race, Sacred Palace would definitely become a huge threat to Yao Yao if they were to obtain that Sangshuan saint stamp. Although he currently did not have the strength to oppose Sacred Palace, he was definitely willing to secretly create trouble for them, and at the very least prevent them from obtaining the complete Sangshuan saint stamp. After some thought, Zhu Yuan finally asked, "Then where can I find the other 3 saint runes?" The current him may not have the qualifications to find that Sangshuan saint stamp, but he could search for the 4 saint runes that had been split off from the saint stamp. Upon seeing that Zhu Yuan was finally on board, Patriarch Kang Xian chuckled and said, the second saint rune was sealed in the Tsangshuan sect's Saint Genesis Peak. Tsangshuan sect, Saint Genesis Peak. Patriarch Kang Xian smiled as he nodded. There are a total of 7 peaks in Tsangshuan sect. Every peak has countless disciples, each with their own jobs and cultivation techniques. The Saint Genesis Peak is where I used to seclude myself. Zhu Yuan said, wouldn't that mean that I'll have to enter Tsangshuan sect in order to obtain the second saint rune? Patriarch Kang Xian smiled. Why? Are you not willing? My Tsangshuan sect may not be as powerful as it was in the past, but it is still one of the strongest sects in Tsangshuan heaven. Zhu Yuan chuckled. He was naturally happy to join Tsangshuan sect. After all, he did need a powerful shield for him to go about his mission. Without a backer, Sacred Palace would be able to do anything they pleased with him whenever they wanted. The Saint Genesis Peak was sealed by me before I died, making it such that no one can enter. After the 2 of you entered Tsangshuan sect and passed the peak selection ceremony, you can use my signet to enter the Saint Genesis Peak, break the seal and reopen it. How troublesome. The corners of Zhu Yuan's mouth drew back. Old man, you're the founder of Tsangshuan sect. Can't we take your signet straight to the sect master, and seek permission to enter the Saint Genesis Peak to find the saint rune? No. Patriarch Kang Xian slowly said, the secret of the saint runes is too important, and no one in Tsangshuan sect knows of it. That's why you cannot reveal it. Moreover, Patriarch Kang Xian was silent for a brief moment, before he said, I suspect that my death was not solely because of outsiders. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed. Could there be a spy in Tsangshuan sect? How dangerous. A pained look filled Zhu Yuan's face. He stared at Patriarch Kang Xian and said in a voice that seemed to imply something else, Elder, the task you've given is not easy at all. As the saying goes, if you want a horse to run fast, you've got to feed it well. When Patriarch Kang Xian saw how openly this fellow dared to ask, he could not help but let out an exasperated laugh, before he said in a slightly peeved voice, don't worry, you won't starve to death. He extended a hand as golden rays of light gathered towards it, gradually taking the shape of a drop of golden liquid. It looked like a drop of golden blood. The appearance of this golden drop of blood immediately caused wind to blow loudly as endless Genesis Chi began to surge over. What is it? Zhu Yuan's gaze was glued to the golden drop of blood as he swallowed his saliva. Patriarch Kang Xian softly chuckled. This is what all of you dream of obtaining in the Saint Remains domain, a drop of my saint blood. Saint blood. Zhu Yuan's gaze seemed to boil with excitement as he stared at the drop of golden blood. He could already feel the boundless Genesis Chi contained within it, the purity level causing his scalp to turn slightly numb. How could he not know? Wasn't the reason why all of the geniuses in the Kangmang continent gathered here was for this legendary drop of saint blood? This drop of saint blood held the wonders of a saint. It was said that absorbing it would wash one's bones of impurities and strengthen them. When taken by practitioners that had yet to open their meridian channels, it would take them past the channel opening stage, and directly to the chi nourishing stage. Moreover, their foundations would be unimaginably solid. However, there was clearly no one who would be willing to use such a valuable thing on someone who had yet to open any meridian channels. In addition, the saint blood could reconstruct one's foundations. If one encountered problems in one's cultivation that led to instability in one's foundations, the reconstruction process would be able to perfectly fix these problems. Most importantly, of course, there were numerous marvels contained within the saint blood, which were extremely beneficial to one's future cultivation progress. Patriarch Kang Xian seemed to smile on the surface as he looked towards Zhu Yuan and asked, Brat, is this enough to fill you? Zhu Yuan wiped away the saliva hanging from the corner of his mouth as he made a thumbs-up gesture. Patriarch is so generous. He then paused for a moment before he said, is there any more? Patriarch Kang Xian's handsome youthful face instantly blackened. You think this is some vegetable you can bulk buy in the market? Even at my prime, losing a drop of saint blood will take very long to recover. Zhu Yuan let out a dry laugh. It's a joke, please don't be angry. Patriarch Kang Xian asked in a rather miffed voice, then what about the task I want you to do? Zhu Yuan hurriedly said, don't worry Patriarch, since Sacred Palace is a threat to Big Sis Yao Yao, they will naturally be my number one enemy. No matter what, I will not let the other 3 saint runes land in their hands. Truthfully speaking, he would still choose to help Patriarch Kang Xian even without any benefits. After all, in a certain manner of speaking, Sacred Place was indeed a potential threat to Yao Yao. Go make your preparations. You'll absorb the saint blood here since you might not be able to protect yourself if you leave. Patriarch Kang Xian softly snorted. Zhu Yuan nodded upon hearing this. Patriarch Kang Xian was right. The saint blood was just too enticing, and who knows how many factions were already gathered outside the Saint Remains domain. If they were to find out that he had a drop of saint blood, who knew what kind of evil thoughts would rise in their hearts? He would surely be plagued by an endless amount of trouble. He sat down under the pine tree, his face filled with anticipation. Patriarch Kang Xian flicked his finger, and the golden saint blood transformed into flash of gold as it shot out. It rapidly expanded in the air, turning into a viscous golden mist that flowed into Zhu Yuan through his nose. Boom! A loud boom instantly exploded in Zhu Yuan's mind. He felt as if a volcano was erupting in his body. Scorching golden mist frantically washed through his forelimbs and bones like lava. In his chi dwelling, the dark gold omni-python chi hissed, and began greedily devouring the golden mist. Viscous golden mist filled every corner of Zhu Yuan's body, slowly seeping into his flesh, blood and bones. At this moment, glowing specks of gold began to surface in the blood, flesh and bones within his body. The Genesis Chi undulations from Zhu Yuan's body steadily rose. It was not only his Genesis Chi, even the originally dim and feeble spirit between his brows due to using silver shadow started to recover at an astonishing speed. The wounds from his earlier battle instantly began to mend. Moreover, as his spirit absorbed the golden mist, it began to strengthen, growing more and more corporeal. At this very moment, every part of Zhu Yuan's body was undergoing a drastic transformation. A young man was seated under a pine tree. Genesis Chi spread from his body, seemingly taking the shape of a giant python behind him which continuously devoured sliver after sliver of golden mist. Patriarch Kang Xian's eyes focused slightly as he glanced at the faint giant python behind Zhu Yuan. This Genesis Chi seems to only be grade 5, yet, it seems to contain limitless potential. If I'm not wrong, it should be the legendary ancestral dragon scripture, right? Patriarch Kang Xian looked towards Yao Yao. Yao Yao gave a slight nod, also staring at Zhu Yuan as she said, between the ancestral dragon scripture and Grandpa Hei's heavenly Yuan canon, he chose the former. What an ambitious little fellow. Patriarch Kang Xian chuckled. Ordinary people would not have the courage to make such a decision. After all, the ancestral dragon scripture is too difficult to cultivate, and once one steps onto this path, there is no turning back. Either you become a dragon, or you become a worm. I wonder whether his choice is good or bad. Patriarch Kang Xian shook his head, an unreadable expression on his face. Let this little guy slowly enjoy the transformation brought by the saint blood. Patriarch Kang Xian waved his sleeve as the mists formed into a Go board in front of him. He smiled and asked, "Do you know how to play Go?" Yao Yao held a piece between her fingers, as it made a clear clack on the board. Yao Yao's bright eyes stared at the Go board as she slowly asked, "Why was old Mr. willing to pay such a price to protect me?" Patriarch Kang Xian let out a long sigh. For the future of the human race. Yao Yao's brows furrowed slightly. Do I really have such ability? Patriarch Kang Xian helplessly responded, "You shouldn't probe me for information. The questions in your heart will naturally be answered in time. However, if you have a chance in the future, you may head to Hunyuan Heaven." Hunyuan Heaven. Yao Yao's eyes swirled. Patriarch Kang Xian smiled as he nodded. The strongest heaven amongst the 5 great heavens. It's where Kang Yuan came from. Yao Yao fell a little silent as she gave a faint nod. Thank you, old mister. Half a month later. Genesis Chi surged and churned under the pine tree, where the figure of a youth was also silently seated. Vigorous Genesis Chi trembled around him, causing his clothes to flap without wind. All of a sudden, his body shook violently, as a pillar of Genesis Chi light abruptly shot out from the top of his head. Genesis Chi charged into the sky, transforming into the silhouette of a dark gold python. The giant python hissed at the heavens as it molted off a layer of dark gold light, the new skin underneath now tinged with a hint of purple. At closer inspection, one would see 2 faint golden little lumps on the giant python's head, while claws seemed to emerge at its belly area. Patriarch Kang Xian and Yao Yao lifted their heads to look at the giant python. Oh, the little guy's Genesis Chi has risen to grade 6. Yao Yao nodded. The first signs of dragon horns and claws have appeared, a sign that the python is going to transform into a serpent. It's a pity that it isn't a full transformation, or his Genesis Chi would evolve to the grade 7 world-subduing heavenly serpent Chi. Evidently, Zhu Yuan had properly absorbed all of the sacred dragon blessing from Wu Huang, hence allowing such a huge change to occur to the Omni-Python Chi. From now on, his Omni-Python Chi would be at the grade 6 level. Zhu Yuan's tightly shut eyes abruptly opened at this moment as a clear whistle sounded from his throat. The giant python with hints of serpent features swept downwards, transforming into boundless slightly purplish gold Genesis Chi, as it was swallowed back into Zhu Yuan's abdomen in a single gulp. Rumble. The rumbling sound of thunder abruptly boomed inside Zhu Yuan's body. He stood up as powerful Genesis Chi undulations erupted from his body like a storm. He was much stronger than he had been half a month ago. Zhu Yuan could not help but gasp as he felt the robust Genesis Chi in his body. He had discovered that in the short period of half a month, he had rose from the mid-heaven gate stage to the quasi-alpha origin stage. The true alpha origin stage was now only mere inches away. It could be said to be reaching the alpha origin in a single step. By the cliff, under the pine tree. Unconcealable joy and surprise flooded Zhu Yuan's face, as he felt the robust Genesis Chi in his Chi dwelling. He never expected that a single drop of saint blood would leap him straight from the mid-heaven gate stage to the quasi-alpha origin stage. In fact, he was already able to faintly sense a mysterious domain. If he was not wrong, it should be the rumored alpha origin heaven. There were 9 levels in the alpha origin heaven, and each contained ancient alpha origin Chi. Absorbing this alpha origin Chi would gradually alter one's Chi dwelling, causing enormous changes. When the Chi dwelling eventually reaches its limit, it would evolve, turning into the divine dwelling. Once the divine dwelling was formed, one may step into the divine dwelling stage. At which point, one's Genesis Chi would become as vast as the clouds, able to cover an area spanning 100 miles, making it incomparable to the alpha origin stage. Now that I'm already able to sense the existence of the alpha origin heaven, I only need to enter it to truly step into the alpha origin stage. Mumbled Zhu Yuan to himself. At Zhu Yuan's original speed, he would need at least a year of tough training in order to reach the quasi-alpha origin stage from the mid-heaven gate stage. Who could have imagined that he would be able to achieve the same outcome in half a month? Most importantly, this jump in cultivation did not make Zhu Yuan's foundations unstable, but instead increasingly sturdy and solid. The wonders of the saint blood was truly difficult to imagine for ordinary people. How is it? Are satisfied with my drop of saint blood? While Zhu Yuan was immersed in his joy, laughter was suddenly heard from the side. Zhu Yuan raised his head, seeing Patriarch Kang Xian's handsome smiling face. Many thanks to Elder for your gift. Zhu Yuan cupped his hands together with a solemn expression. He had personally felt the benefits brought by the saint blood. Not only had it made his foundations even more stable than before, it also raised his strength. Most importantly, of course, there were several marvels contained within that would perhaps bring him numerous benefits on the future road of his cultivation journey. Patriarch Kang Xian waved his hand and said, "This blessing was won with your own hands." Zhu Yuan could see that Patriarch Kang Xian's seemed to have become much more illusory, likely because his Genesis Chi was about to be completely exhausted. It was obvious that after giving the drop of saint blood to Zhu Yuan, the tiny bit of spirit energy that Patriarch Kang Xian was composed of would not last much longer. Kid, no need to be sentimental. The purpose of this tiny bit of spirit energy was to wait for the one I needed to wait for. Now that my purpose has been fulfilled, it's naturally time for me to go. Patriarch Kang Xian smiled. You only need to remember the task I set you. Zhu Yuan said in a heavy voice, "Don't worry, Elder. I will definitely give my all, and not let the other 3 saint runes land in Sacred Palace's hands." This video will end here.